Okay everybody, a very good afternoon to you all. My name's James Donaldson. I come from Manchester in the United Kingdom, and today I've come to the site of the most horrific crime in the whole of humanity, Auschwitz, Birkenau. This in front of me here, and I'll just turn the camera around, here you see the site of the worst crime in history. This is the railway line that led into the Birkenau death camp, where from 1942 onwards Jews were brought when Adolf Hitler started and the Nazis started their what they called the final solution to the Jewish question. Let us now enter this scene of unimaginable and horrific death and destruction. Okay, so I'm now currently stood on the train lines where the trains used to roll in from all over Europe, bringing with them people who had no idea of what fate awaited them. The people were told that they were going to work for the German war effort, but of course that was not the intention at all. That was all the part of a Nazi game of deception. And they were brought here, most people were brought here to be just put straight in the gas chambers and murdered. Some were taken for forced labour, but most people who, once they arrived on this track, they were into their final minutes. What you see in front of me now is the drainage ditch. This is where those who were selected for forced labour would basically, all the sewage was pumped down here, and they would basically clean the sewage out and were basically worked to death, basically, in appalling conditions. A shift here would be long, harrowing and gruelling. It's really unimaginable, really. And this fence you see just here was electrified all the way along. What you can see also behind the fence is one of the watchtowers. This is where the Nazis would have been basically stood just watching the whole procedure, keeping an eye on those leaving the trains, keeping an eye on those who were forced to do slave labour. They'd have had their guns drawn, just ready to open fire at a moment's notice. Of course, they were all in nice. Of course, the people, the Nazis who, well, I can't call them people really, they were animals, who were the animals who were basically watching over this whole process, were of course kept in conditions far less grievous than their victims. These huts that you can see all around me now, these were basically quarantine camps where men, both Jewish and non-Jewish, from different countries during August 1943 to November 1944, they were basically forced to live in appalling conditions, and the purpose of the quarantine was to identify those who may have had infectious diseases, terrorise newly arrived concentration camp prisoners, and teach submission to camp discipline. From November of 1944, sick prisoners from other parts of the camp, both men and women, lived in some of the barracks in this compound. Imagine being forced to live in this. Pretty horrendous, I'm sure you'll agree with me. What you see here, these were basically toilets. Imagine having to go to extremely unsanitary, absolutely filthy. Imagine having to go to the toilet on one of these. Absolutely beggars belief. This hut that you see in front of me now, and there's quite a fair few of them as you'll see, these are basically where the Nazis, where the SS would basically, on a freezing cold winter's night, they'd be keeping warm in there, whilst those who were unlucky enough to be their victims were basically being either murdered in gas chambers or exposed to freezing cold weather. This fence was electrified, and I do believe that it was not at all uncommon that some people just took their lives on this fence. Absolutely awful.